Hello YouTube and welcome back to another book review. Today I have finished my Library of America volume on William Faulkner's novels 1930 to 1935. I've reviewed previous novels on the channel, but I finally finished the last one. It's called Pylon and it was written in 1935, and that's what I want to talk about today. But first I want to talk a little bit about the Library of America edition. As you know, if you watch my channel, I love Library of America editions. I think they're great, they're durable, they're attractive. They comprise a lot of important literature, but it's frustrating that they take so long to read. Like, this is 4 novels in one. I've had this like 5 years, and I do a Goodreads reading goal every year where I say I want to read so many books. Usually it's around 50. Try to read 50 books a year, one a week, and so I can review them for the channel every week. And this counts as one book. It's 4 books. It takes me 5 years to read because I jump back and forth and read lots of different styles and genres and authors and stuff. And it counts as only one book, even though it's 4, and that's really frustrating. But I do really love Library of America, and I think they're great, and I need to get more of them. So I finished this Pylon, one of Faulkner's lesser known, kind of more minor novels, I would say. And I have kind of a complicated relationship with Faulkner. I mean, some of his stuff I think is great. I really loved As I Lay Dying. I thought it was funny and dark and awesome. Some of his stuff I kind of liked the grittiness of it and the realism of like what it was like, that Southern Gothic, that like what it was like in the South and that time period, and a lot of the awful stuff that went on. Like in particular, Light in August has a lot of stuff about like slavery and segregation and how awful that was, and it's a wake up call. It's like it's good to know that. So I like that kind of stuff. But I find him quite difficult to read. I struggle with his style a lot. And it takes me usually about, half the book, usually have 100 pages into the book to really kind of get to grips with the style and remind myself of what it's like to read Faulkner, because he writes so differently than other people. And there's pros and cons to that. I think sometimes what he writes is really unique and brilliant and beautiful. Sometimes I find it kind of a chore. One of the things I really dislike about his writing is his dialogue. He writes fairly realistic dialogue, I would say, and that it mirrors the way that people actually talk in real life, but it's frustrating to read because characters never finish their sentences. They repeat themselves over and over again. They'll say the same thing 4 or 5 times in a row. And I'm like, why am I spending 2 pages of dialogue just hearing this character stutter and try to stumble and try to get out one thought? Never actually finish it. And it's actually a pet peeve of mine in real life when people refuse to finish their sentences and they interrupt themselves and they start like 5 different thoughts and never finish a single one of them. That really bothers me. It's hard for me to listen to because you have that sense of anticipation, that sense of expectation and suspense, waiting for the last word of the sentence to deliver the concept home, and it never comes. And Faulkner does that a lot in his dialogue, where people just take forever to get to the point and just repeat themselves over and over. So it bothers me. But I like a lot of his stuff. So there's pros and cons. Also, there's a bit of a show about nothing to his books a lot of the times, where, and this is particularly true, I think, of Pylon, where nothing really happens for most of it. There is one big thing that happens in Pylon, which I'll get to when I describe the plot, but it's a lot of like, realistic minutia of life and just kind of people in the situations that they're in. And it's not like there's a big story arc. I've been listening to Brandon Sanderson's podcast about writing a lot, and he's talking about how writing for him is like problem solving. And he's like, I got to figure out how I get characters from point A to point B and how I make this plot make sense and how I solve these problems. You get the sense there's none of that in Faulkner. It's just like, this is just people hanging out doing their thing, and like there's not like a driving plot that goes to it. So I typically don't love those kind of novels, but some of Faulkner's I have really liked. So let's get on to Pylon. Pylon, written in 1935, is one of his few books not set in his fictional Mississippi county, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. It takes place in a fictionalized version of New Orleans called New Valois, and it is set at the dedication of a new airport. And they're having to commemorate this event. They're having a big air show, the last 3-day air show, where pilots come and they fly, do trick shots or trick flying, and they do stunts, and they do races, and they do stuff like that. And there's a reporter who goes to cover the show, and he becomes fascinated with this group of 3 people, or 4 people really. These 2 men, one's a pilot named Robert Schumann, and the other one is a parachute jumper, and they're both kind of after the same woman who's, ostensibly married to one of them but is having an affair with the other one. And she's got a son named Jack, and it's kind of unclear who is the real father of the son. And he becomes kind of obsessed with this couple, or this love triangle, and follows them around and keeps wanting to write about them. And he keeps going to his editor, and he's like, I got this story, and the editor's like, I sent you to cover the air show. Who cares about this love triangle? It's stupid. And there's actually, like, my favorite part of the book is a long telephone conversation where the reporter is talking to the editor and trying to, like, pitch his story, and the editor is just furious with him because he keeps ignoring his advice. And I think it's like a moment of real comedy in there, which, Faulkner can do very well. Like, As I Lay Dying had a lot of really funny bits in it. And this doesn't have as many, but that's sort of a funny bit. And so anyway, the reporter becomes fascinated. The reporter is a real, like, heavy drinking alcoholic type who's like, he keeps trying to go on the wagon and he can't stay on for more than like 6 hours. But he becomes fascinated with this love triangle and starts hanging around with them and trying to help them out. And what ends up happening is the plane that the pilot Schumann is supposed to fly in the show is not functional, and he has to go try to get access to another plane, and the plane that he gets access to is very dangerous. And he's warned against using it, but he does it anyway because he needs the prize money, and predictably it doesn't end well. Spoiler alert, sorry, but that's actually not even the end of the book. It just happens midway through, but it doesn't end well. And so that's kind of the story, but it's drawn out, and it takes a long time to unfold. And it's not, like I said, it's not plot driven. It's more about the characters and about their interaction and the obsession of the reporter with this love triangle. And there's also like the mechanic whose name is Jiggs, I think. He's like obsessed with this pair of cowboy boots he sees in a window, and he's like constantly trying to get these cowboy boots on, and they don't fit, and he can't get them on his feet. And so like there's a lot of sort of obsession themes in the book. And the being willing to fly a plane even though it's dangerous because you have to fly is another aspect of that. And another part I liked about it is there's a lot of like real fragmentary newspaper headlines that keep cropping up over and over again. Like it's just like the first 3 words of a newspaper headline that are all juxtaposed together to kind of illustrate the sameness of all the newspaper headlines and how they all kind of sound the same, and the content doesn't really matter. It's about the form and how no one really cares or reads the whole story. It's just about the sensationalism of the headline. I think that's a little bit of possible satire in there. I'm not sure if that was his intention, but that's how I read it. So I would say Pylon is not my favorite Faulkner novel by any stretch of the imagination. I prefer his, Southern Gothic Mississippi ones. This is pretty simple and pretty straightforward. Not a lot happens in it. I find it quite slow, and I find it a little bit difficult to get into. There are enjoyable parts, there are funny parts, but I really liked As I Lay Dying. I liked Light in August for the kind of, realism and the location setting, the feeling what it was like to be in that place and time. And then Sanctuary was the third one I read in the book, was like just so brutal and such a harrowing read. I appreciated that a lot as well. This is probably my least favorite of the 4 that I've read so far. But Faulkner, always an interesting guy to check out. So I'm glad that I finally got around to finishing my Library of America edition. There's like a bunch of these. This is just novels from 30 to 35. He wrote like for about a 40-year period, 30 to 40-year period. So there's many more, and I should probably get another one. And I would like to know from you, my wonderful audience, like, what other Faulkner novels should I read? Where do I go next after these 4? What other volumes in the Library of America system should I get? What other American authors do I need to check out and get their Library of America volumes to add to my collection? I have quite a few, but there's a lot I don't have. And I don't, American literature, I read a lot of British literature as well. So there's a lot of American authors that I have yet to check out. So let me know about that in the comments. Other Faulkner books to read, other American authors to check out that I can get these nice copies for my shelf. I would very much appreciate it. And if you like this review, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, click the bell for notifications, and check back next week for another book review. I don't know what it's going to be. I think it'll probably be another science fiction book next week because I got a few of those lying around, but I got to get started on it. So hope you enjoyed me talking about Pylon by William Faulkner. Always an interesting guy, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks so much for watching. Take it easy.